Okay, this effect I'm going to show you is sort of a space effect, and it gives kind of a neat little look to a space scene if you're creating one. The first thing I'm going to do is just start out with our default scene, and I'm going to delete our ground plane and actually go up to Load Atmosphere, and under Others, I can select uh, a solid black, or I can select outer space or no atmosphere to start out with. I'm actually going to go with the black back and click OK. This goes to give us an entirely black background. And now I want to actually go to Atmosphere Editor. And what we're going to be doing is creating a sort of a large sun, as if we're close to a star. And what we can actually do is edit our color map and define sort of our sun by actually editing the full sky's color, because it is going to give a sort of a rounded look to it, so we can appear as if we're very close to a star. I'm going to go ahead here and click a new key point, and I want to add a sort of a bright yellow. I'm going to add another key point right in front of it, and it's going to be black, which is going to give us our fall off, and we can adjust this, which is going to pretty much give us sort of the rays of our sun. But we're going to edit our last one first. Edit this color, double click on it, and we'll go up to sort of an orange. And really the colors are your preference. But already we can see the preview that we're getting in our little thumbnail preview. And actually what we can do is take our sun, and if we want, position it in the center of the sky so that the lighting is correct for your scene. But what we can do is turn off the lens flare. Going up here and right mouse click and go to no lens flare, and that way we don't have that affecting our scene at all. We might even want to change this color map a little bit more. We could double click on it and go to some of the presets and sort of edit those, or we can go to edit color map and sort of continue making our own. I'm going to make this more of an orange, and then I want to create a new key point in the center, which is rather bright yellow, and I'm going to do that on the end as well. And click OK. And now you can see we have that sort of nice sun in the background. Of course, it's very plain. There's not a whole lot to it, but it still gives you a neat little effect if you want to sort of have a close-up, maybe add a planet right here, and you can do some neat things with it. But I'm going to go back now and actually edit a little bit more, because I think that fall off is a little too sharp, and I think a sun would or a star would create a little bit more. So what we can do is edit our color map again, and I'm going to expand that key point I made, and we can just take a look at our preview and see how far that comes off. You can bring it all the way down if you wanted to. Although I wouldn't suggest going too close to the horizon, because if you notice, we're starting to get sort of a flat line right there, and we don't want that. And then we can also adjust the size of our sun just by adjusting these overall effects and these key points. Go ahead and move that in, and that gives us kind of a nice flare. We can move up here, and you'll see that it's pretty much covering the whole scene, but it's sort of faking the effect and not so much actually creating it, but can look pretty neat. Maybe even edit that a little bit down just a little, and there we go. Click OK. Okay. And now there's one thing we really can't do with this, and I'll show you that one in a sec. First I'm going to do a quick render of this at 640 by 480 just so you can see how it looks at this point. And you can see we get a nice fall off here of the sun. That's kind of a sharp line right there. We could always go in there and edit that. And it's all just edited by that color map gradient that we're using for the sky. But there's one thing that's missing, and that is stars. So we're going to go to Atmosphere Editor, Effects, Stars. And I'm going to increase the number of stars, turn down our brightness a little. But let's go ahead and render that and see how that looks. One thing you'll notice is that the stars kind of show up maybe a little bit too brightly in this region, where you might want to see them fade out. And now the best thing to really do for that is to actually get an image map of stars created in a photo editing program, or if you actually have images of stars, get sort of a spherical map, and you can map that to the background of your scene, or even to a cube or a sphere, and then make it as large as you want the scene. And that way you might be able to get rid of some of those uh, stars that are interfering. Of course, if you use a sphere, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with still some of these stars. And what I usually like doing is, if am going to create a scene like this, is to make sure the sun is white. And that way, if you don't want to create an image map, you don't have to, because these stars are only going to be white, and they will not show up inside the sun. But if you take a look here, if you don't really want to have to do any major editing, because these stars really shouldn't be showing up this brightly with this sort of haze that we have coming from here. So we could edit that if we wanted to and sort of define an environment map. I'm going to click OK. And what we could do is go ahead and add a planet just by adding sort of a sphere in here. And I'll just move this down. And I'm going to double click on the surface, and let's sort of add a planet type material to it. And I'm just going to use something we already have by going to rocks. And there's a couple of them we could use. Go to complex rock. And we'll take a look at our preview and see how it looks. It looks a little strange with this material in here. So what I can actually do is edit this material. And we could either remove it, or we can change our influence and environment to none or extremely strong, and really mix the materials, but it kind of depends how we want to make this planet look. I'm going to keep it right there, but there's one thing you notice, and that is we don't really have sort of that nice defined line that we would get of diffusion from an actual planet. So let's go in and actually edit our diffusion. I'm going to edit a material, going up to the preview over here, and I'm going to find one of these overall shapes. Go to this first material and go to effects, and we can change our diffuse. And the more contrast we create, it will look a little more realistic. You can see it's nice and bright, and then we sort of get that fall off. But a lot of that is become by the ambient light. So we'll decrease our ambient light all the way. And because we actually still have double surface on here, it's going to look a little bit different. But we can also increase our contrast, which is going to give us a nice sharp edge, which isn't really showing up because of that second texture we have in there. So we want to change our material up on top right here, so it's going entirely to material 2. So the best thing to really do for this is to be working with a non-mixed material, unless you want to go back and forth between your materials and actually change them to match diffusion and all of these settings under lighting. But we can change sort of our planet right here. Maybe up our ambient just a little bit more, but then we create this sort of lightness in the background that we don't want, because we would have a very sharp edge on there. So what we can do is just kind of mess with that, and we can go over a little if we wanted to, maybe 200 for diffusion. And let's take a look, see how it looks in the scene. And sometimes your preview is going to look extremely bright, but as we look in the scene, that actually looks about right. We could up our ambient to 1, just so we get a tiny little bit of light showing behind our planet. Anywhere between 1 and 5 will work. And because we adjusted our contrast, we're getting that nice sharp edge that we would see in space. So it's kind of a neat thing we can do. And we'll just position our planet, and we get kind of a nice little scene there. Of course, right now, without entirely realistic stars, but it's still kind of a neat looking effect. And actually, because of where our sun is placed, or our distant light, our sunlight, it's going to look a little bit different. So we want to get kind of behind it and make sure everything looks correct, which is why putting it in the center of the scene will give you the most accurate representation. But if we want to make it a little fake, we can do this and get kind of a nice crescent in there. And I'll go ahead and just render that. And that's kind of neat looking. We still have a little bit of weirdness in the back, but removing the ambient and actually bringing down our bump map a little will fix a lot of that. But that's a neat little effect you can do to sort of fake the sun being quite large and having sort of a planetary space exploration type thing where we're nice and close to the sun.